Hi, I'm Joe Graydon.
I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy, where we bring you the stories behind the health headlines.
This podcast is brought to you by Redix Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Body Cream. 800-345-7339, on the web at uttercream.com. Couples fight over the darndest things, like the right way to wash dishes. How can they keep their relationships healthy? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Dr. Dawn Azevedo has been counseling couples for more than 25 years.
Relationships get into trouble all the time, just like people get sick all of the time. Should we just let everybody die when they get a cold? No. Just because you're in trouble doesn't mean that divorce is the answer.
Learn how to listen to your partner with an open heart and fight fairly.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, find out how to tell if your relationship is in trouble and what you can do about it.
First, the news.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, spending time outside reduces the likelihood that young people will become nearsighted and need glasses. Myopia has become increasingly common around the world. New research published in JAMA Ophthalmology suggests that when teenagers and young adults are exposed to more sunlight, it reduces their risk for myopia later in life. The study participants were Europeans aged 65 and older. Increased exposure to ultraviolet B light between 14 and 39 years of age reduced the odds of nearsightedness substantially. Perhaps it's time to encourage youngsters to spend more time outdoors instead of staring at computer screens, using smartphones, and playing video games.
Patients with an irregular heart rhythm called atrial fibrillation are frequently prescribed an anticoagulant to keep blood clots from forming and lodging in the brain. One of the more popular medications for clot prevention is called Pradaxa, known generically as dabigatran. New research shows that when this drug is combined with a cholesterol-lowering drug such as simvastatin or lovastatin, there's an increased risk for hemorrhage. These statins increase blood levels of dabigatran, which raises the chance of excessive bleeding.
People with life-threatening cancer often feel understandably anxious or depressed. Pilot studies conducted at Johns Hopkins University and New York University Langone Medical Center demonstrate that psilocybin, the psychoactive compound in hallucinogenic mushrooms, provides significant relief from debilitating emotional distress. In these double-blind studies, patients receiving psilocybin reported less depression and death anxiety, and more optimism, quality of life, and life satisfaction. About 2/3 rated the single dose of psilocybin as one of the most meaningful experiences in their lives.
The liver is the organ that detoxifies many compounds that humans ingest, including prescription and over-the-counter drugs and herbs. A recent review of drug-induced liver injury found that the common pain reliever acetaminophen is the most common culprit. Nearly half of Americans with acute liver failure suffered liver injury from acetaminophen taken at high doses or for long periods of time. Hundreds of other medications may also contribute to liver injury, so physicians and patients need to be alert for signs of liver trouble. Because diagnosis can be challenging, symptoms such as abdominal pain, nausea, fever, fatigue, or jaundice should prompt laboratory testing of liver enzymes.
New research on treating ovarian cancer with immunotherapy is analyzing the participants' microbiomes as part of the trial. The 40 women in the study have recurrent ovarian cancer and are getting a combination of anti-cancer drugs, including Keytruda, Avastin, and Cytoxan. Keytruda is a relatively new drug that's been approved for treating melanoma and non-small cell lung cancer. This is one of the first trials to pit Keytruda against ovarian cancer. It's also the first cancer study to analyze samples from the stool, skin, and vaginas of the volunteers, along with samples of their tumors and blood. The researchers are looking for clues into how our microbiomes affect our immune responses and whether they have an impact on the effectiveness of cancer treatment.
When it comes to strokes, time is brain. In other words, getting a prompt diagnosis and emergency treatment is crucial for limiting brain damage. A new study shows that crowded emergency departments put people at risk for death or serious disability. In an ideal situation, a patient with symptoms such as a sudden severe headache, one-sided numbness or paralysis, trouble speaking, difficulty seeing, or trouble walking should have brain imaging within 25 minutes of arriving at the emergency room. To reduce damage to the brain, experts recommend treatment with clot-busting drugs within 3 hours of the onset of symptoms. A busy emergency department may not meet these goals. Researchers reviewed medical records for nearly 500 patients treated for stroke over the course of a year. About 60% of the patients got brain scans within 25 minutes. When the emergency department was crowded, however, it took longer to get patients in for imaging. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Our family backgrounds can have a powerful impact on our behavior. We learn from our parents and other relatives about the do's and don'ts of family relationships. Sometimes it's the little things that drive our partners crazy.
To learn more about keeping relationships healthy, we turn to Dr. Don Acevedo. He's a clinical psychologist and founder of Acevedo Family Psychology.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Don Acevedo.
Thank you so much, Terry. I'm so happy to be here with the two of you.
And we're delighted to have you as well. You know, Dr. Acevedo, when a relationship starts to show strain, little things can really get blown up out of proportion. We refer to this as the toothpaste tube dilemma. You know, normally nobody cares. Mm-hmm. But when you're feeling kind of irritable and grumpy and annoyed and whatever, he's like, how could you squeeze the toothpaste tube in the middle? What's wrong with you? And people can get into big fights over something so simple. Could you share your story about dishwashing?
Certainly. I grew up in a Latin American household here in the United States, and we often sponsored families from our family to come over to the United States. So our house was full. We'd have, 20 people in the house. So when you went into the kitchen to prepare meals, the counters needed to be cleaned, everything needed to be put away. So when you cleaned up after the meal, the whole idea of washing the dishes was you washed them, rinsed them, dried them, put them away, cleaned any of the apparatus that you used, like a toaster or other kinds of things, and put that away so that when you were finished cleaning the kitchen, the counters were clean and empty and ready for the next meal. Made perfect sense when you were preparing food for that many people. Fast forward, I married my wonderful wife, who comes from a small family. There's just the four of them. So you'd wash dishes, rinse them, stick them in the drain board, and they would stay. When we got married, I cooked most of the time, so my wife would do the dishes. But I would come into the kitchen, and the dishes weren't done because there was stuff in the drying board. So I would dry it, put it away, and resent each of these things because I had cooked this wonderful meal and you didn't do your part. Eventually, that blew up, and we had a great argument. And of course, we each got defensive, saying that the way we did it was right. Well, in all honesty, neither of those ways is right. They are both useful, but not necessarily right. So we needed to come up with, instead of defending our family's points of view, what would our family be? What just she and I? And so we recognized it's not likely we're ever going to have 20 people in our house, so probably the drain board was all right. And I could relax. Things were still clean. Things were still okay.
This required some understanding of, quote unquote, where she was coming from, or in her case, where you were coming from, that past history, that family background. How important is that in counseling?
So it's really important. So when you think about it, we are enculturated by our families. So the way they do things becomes the norm for us, whether or not that actually applies anywhere else in the world. So there are some families where when you walk in the house, you take off your shoes and you walk around inside the house in your stockinged feet or put on slippers or that kind of thing. That's fine. Other families, you walk in, your shoes go everywhere, and you put them away in your own room. Is one right or wrong? No, it's how we're enculturated. So finding out how your spouse was enculturated, really paying attention to that without judgment, just saying, hey, that's how that family worked, is really important in getting an insight into how they think, how they problem solve, what they expect. Now, if you don't like that, that's fine. The two of you can talk and say, what will we have in our home? What will our culture be? What are our values?
That part about without judgment, I think, is absolutely critical and difficult for many people. And I'm thinking, how would you know what your spouse had grown up with? Well, in many cases, you do have some interaction with your in-laws. And just saying the word in-laws instantly brings up images of tense interactions for some people in some situations. But if you sort of turned it to the idea of, I'm an investigator, I'm going to just observe what is being done and how, leave out the why part. That's probably too complicated and maybe too touchy. But just observe what's being done, and then I'll understand more about where my spouse is coming from.
And you're absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, I have a great joke about that, but I'll tell you that one later.
No, I want to hear that now.
You want to hear that joke now?
Yes, I do.
So, wonderful young couple gets married. They come to their home and they say, now we're a family and we want to host the next Easter dinner. And this was a big thing in her family, that Easter dinner happened and you provided the main course and other people brought other things. And so she says, we have to get a ham. So off goes the husband, gets this beautiful ham, brings it back. She immediately chops off the right end and then the left end and throws them away. Takes the middle part, puts it in the oven. And he looks at her because they're young and they don't have a lot of money. And he goes, that was a perfectly good ham and you cut off the right end and then the left end and threw them away. What were you doing? She looked at him with daggers in her eyes and said, that's the way my mother did it. It's the way my grandmother did it. It's the right way to do it. Get out of my kitchen. Whoa. So he's going, oh my Lord, what is going on here? Mom shows up and she's got the side dishes and that kind of stuff. And he takes them and greets them as they come in and goes, Mom, I got to ask you a question. I bought this ham. And my wife, she cut off the right end and threw it away and cut off the left end and threw it away. And she said, that's the way you did it and the way your mother did it. And I don't understand. Those are perfectly good parts of the ham. The mother looked at him with daggers and said, that's the way my mother did it. It is the correct way to make a ham. I don't know who my daughter married. And he's going, oh, I'm in trouble now. Grandmother shows up. She's got the pies. She brings the pies in. He takes them. He sits grandmother down, gives her a glass of wine and says, Grandmother, I got to ask this question. I bought this ham. Wife cut off the right end, cut off the left end, threw them away, and put it in the oven. And she said, that's the right way. And she yelled at me. And then your daughter yelled at me. Grandmother, why do you cut off the ends? And she looked at him with innocent eyes and said, that's how big my oven was.
Exactly. There was a reason.
There was a reason. There is a why, but it's often really hard to get to, and most people don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Right? So just observing, being patient, right? Being curious, right? Gentle curiosity. This is one of the things when I'm doing marital therapy with folks I talk about all the time. When you don't understand something or it's different from what you do, approach it with gentle curiosity. Help me understand what this is and what it means to you. Often behaviors for someone mean something. Like in that story, it meant I'm connected to my mother, I'm connected to my grandmother. Had nothing to do with preparing a ham.
Well, so often we're judgmental. And like your way is the wrong way and my way is the right way. And that leads to all kinds of conflict. And oftentimes when there are some rocky things that start happening in a relationship, we get very hung up on the dishes or the toothpaste tube or the ham. Mm-hmm. So how do we begin to understand where the fractures are and what the problems are in a relationship so that we can actually deal with them honestly and forthrightly?
So the first step in that is identifying we're in a trouble spot. There's tension between us. It's reminding yourself, I want to be in a relationship with you, right? I chose you. There are 6 billion people in the world. I chose you out of those 6 billion people. So we're in a trouble spot. We're in difficulty. I need to understand. And here we go back to Stephen Covey. Remember, one of his 7 habits, first listen to understand and then speak to be understood. So you listen first and say, what's happening for you when this behavior goes on? Right? You engage in this behavior. It bothers me in some difficult way. What's going on for you? Then really listen without judgment, without prejudgment. Like, I know why you're doing this. You're doing this, and it's always spiteful.
Well, it's usually just to irritate me.
Yeah, just to irritate. You spend your whole day thinking about ways to hurt me, which is obviously not true, right? So begin with the idea, so what's going on for you? Why are you choosing that? And really breathe into that space. You want to understand, not judge. Judging is easy. If you want to be judgmental, then plan to live alone.
Are there some practical things that people can do to become mindful of the stuff that they've brought with them from their own families of origin?
There's a number of ways to do that. So one of the ways is to go back through your life and say, it's easier if you identify a particular behavior. Mm-hmm. Here's a behavior I'm engaging in. I come through the door, I take off my shoes, and I leave them there in the doorway, right? Mm-hmm. They're not out of the way. They're not tucked away. I just took them off because I wanted to take them off. I'm more comfortable being barefoot. My spouse gets upset by that. Mm-hmm. Stop for a moment and say, well, so why am I choosing that? What happened in my life that said that was okay? How has it worked in the past? Oh, well, when I was a kid, I would do that, and my mom would pick up those shoes, and she never complained. Mm-hmm. My wife's not my mom. She doesn't want to pick up my shoes. Is that a reasonable thing?
Sounds reasonable to me.
But you have to spend the time to look inside. Most of us don't want to spend the time. We want a microwave life where, boom, it's just there. That's not the world we live in.
You're listening to Dr. Don Azevedo, founder of Azevedo Family Psychology in Cary, North Carolina.
So am I doing a little better on putting my shoes away?
Yes.
We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll find out how people set up the foundation for fights and how they can do things differently.
Breathing and listening seems simple, but like so many simple things, they're not that easy. They are critical skills for any relationship.
What is an emotionally literate couple?
How do people learn to identify their own feelings?
And how can people come to an agreement about raising teenagers, even if they have different parenting scripts and expectations?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you value the health information you get when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, consider subscribing to our email newsletter. You'll get the latest health news and information on upcoming podcasts delivered to your inbox twice a week. Look for the link at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions that deeply moisturize to make dry skin feel soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you would like to order a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. This is show number 1060. That number again, 800-732-2334, or you can find the show at our website, peoplespharmacy.com.
Today, we're talking about how couples can learn how to fight fairly and listen with an open heart.
Our guest is Dr. Don Azevedo, a clinical psychologist and marriage counselor.
So here's a scenario. Guy works really hard and comes home after 45-minute commute, nasty traffic, exhausted. Eats dinner, doesn't wash the dishes the way you would, and watches the news and then watches television for the next couple of hours. Wife washes the dishes, cleans up, plays online Scrabble because that's her thing. And they go to bed without having had much interaction for those couple of hours after dinner. And there's the spark, the energy, the good feelings that they had had 20 years earlier have sort of faded. And when an argument comes up, he complains, "Oh, you just spend all your time playing Scrabble." Mm-hmm. And she says, "Yeah, and all you do is watch television." Mm-hmm. And now we've got the foundation for a fight and complex problems. How would they go about dealing with that scenario?
Number one, they have to identify that they're in a trouble spot. Hey, I notice that many nights you watch TV, I play Scrabble, we're in the same room, but we're not really in the same place. You have to identify the problem. And then ask your partner, do you notice that too? Undoubtedly, if approached that way, the spouse would say, I do notice that. Is this the life we want to live? Because I don't think I want to live that. Then the other person goes, I don't really want that either. What could we do differently? How do we set ourselves up for that particular outcome? Well, I'm tired and frustrated from the commute home and da-da-da-da. Wife might say, I'm really willing to hear about your day, and maybe if you unloaded that, it wouldn't be so heavy on you. She might say, I feel really lonely, so I reach out for connections over the internet because I ain't getting it from you. Well, maybe I'd be willing to listen to what your day has been like, or maybe we can go for a walk or some other thing. But until you've identified the trouble spot and both of you have agreed that it is a trouble spot and you want to solve it, there are no solutions available.
And you talked about breathing and listening. Tell us why they're so important.
So many people spend most of their life listening to respond. They're hearing your words, but they're planning, here's how I'm going to respond. If you can let go of that by breathing, I'm really taking in what you're saying. It is important to me. I am willing to be influenced by your thoughts. All of those things going on. So I'm breathing in your words, your thoughts, your point of view. I can relax and not need to respond. I can let go of being right, which is what drives the judgmental part, right? We're so trained particularly in American society, that we have to know the answer, we have to be right, we have to know it right now, instantly. We've lost the opportunity to just be present with the information for a while before beginning to solve. Right?
I love that. I'm going to try it because one additional benefit of breathing and listening and not trying to figure out how you're going to respond might be that I would interrupt Joe less. And that could be a very good thing. I'm going to try it.
Well, I think you're perfect just the way you are.
Good response.
But what you're saying applies to all of our interactions and relationships, because a lot of time all we're doing is just listening long enough to start formulating our response and, kind of gathering up our arrows so that we can poke holes in the other person. And so just listening with curiosity and an open heart, boy, that changes the whole dynamic.
Absolutely. And you're right that it's not just with your spouse. It's with your children, it's with your siblings, it's with your parents, aunts and uncles, the people you work with. What would the world be like if you went into a corporation and had a conversation where the other person wasn't assembling their arrows and bullets and landmines and all the other things that happen in corporate worlds, right? That lead us to be so frustrated and tired at the end of the day. What if we really tried to understand one another and spent the time measuring the problem before trying to find a solution?
Dr. Azevedo, we understand that you have developed an intervention strategy that you call the emotionally literate couple. Can you tell us about that, please?
Certainly. So the emotionally literate couple is a workshop that my colleague and friend, Dr. Don Adams, and I developed over several years. So Don and I have known each other 24 years and been marital and family therapists together, thinking about what helps couples. How do you move them from antagonistic interactions to loving interactions? So what we designed was the emotionally literate couple, because we understood that most couples struggling like that are emotionally illiterate. And what I mean by that is they don't take the time or have the skills to know what they are feeling accurately, and then knowing what they feel to confide it in the other person, and the other person's ability to take in that information and do something with it. So this is a whole lot like learning a language. If you don't know what the words on the page are, you can't take it in and you can't process it. And you can't write anything because you don't have that. Same thing here with emotions. So we help couples really begin to identify what emotions are going on. They can point to the behavior that is the problem, but what they don't understand are the thoughts or beliefs or emotions that are occurring for them that drives their next choice in behaving in response.
Now, I think of this as sort of a kind of such a stereotype. I hate it. A guy thing. So the guy shows up and he says, I don't know. I don't have any feelings about this one way or the other. And she's like, well, I'm all about feelings. And he never tells me what he's feeling. I'm sure that there are a lot of situations where that's not the case. But that's sort of the general perception, that women are much more touchy-feely and guys are just sort of, they've got their armor on.
Mm-hmm.
How, some stereotypes have some roots in reality. How do you help a man, or a woman for that matter, actually identify and be able to experience their feelings if they have been pretty good at isolating them, and maybe dad was as well, and grandpa too, for that matter, and so the family of origin never expressed much in the way of an emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand that.
So I'm actually an excellent example of this. I grew up in a Latin American home where men were allowed to have all the emotions there are. Anger.
Right.
A Latin American man in my time was not allowed to show fear, was not allowed to show pain. I remember breaking my arm and my father being in the doorway, and I would not cry. I would not yell out when I should have. It would have been perfectly appropriate for that. Not going to happen, because men only showed anger. Right? That was the deal. A lot of men grow up that way. And, moms, you got to teach your kids all of the emotions, just like dads do. But if dads come in shorthanded, moms have got to step up to the plate. Right? So it's got to be okay for a boy to cry. It's got to be okay for a boy to be scared and work through the fear and that kind of stuff in order to own all of their own emotions. So now, how do you help them when they're an adult? They've come into my office. Wife is saying he never shares his emotions. Very typical comment. And I'm watching the man and listening to the man's story, and the emotions are evident, but they are not expressed in words because he doesn't have that language. He's illiterate in being able to describe those emotions in words that she is fluent in. She's had lots of opportunities to feel and express those emotions and has been coached, taught how to articulate the varieties of anxiety, the varieties of pain and loss and loneliness, right? Things that boys are often punished for bringing up because it's not manly. Now, how do I help them? He's having the emotions, so I have to teach her to read his language, to see the emotion that's coming out when he says things, instead of expecting it to come out in her language. And I have to help him understand her language and be able to respond to it in a loving and caring way instead of a frightened way. Because many times when men are faced with the large emotional vocabulary of a woman, they become frightened and they run away or they respond with anger.
Well, what else would you respond with if anger is what you're allowed, right?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. You can ask my wife about the early years of our marriage.
So how did you change? I mean, your family of origin was from Brazil, and you learned from your dad that anger was okay.
Yes.
And other stuff maybe not so much. And so when you got married, you had to re-examine and redefine your emotional intelligence.
Yes. Now, I attribute the beginning part of that change to a woman who came before my wife. Girlfriend for a long time. We actually got engaged, although that never made it there. She would not tolerate my anger. She was a tougher, stronger, not from my wife, but just a woman, young lady, actually. We were 17 when we met, 16, 17, somewhere in there. But she just didn't tolerate that whole macho thing.
So she wasn't going to take any nonsense from you.
That's right. She could push back as hard as I pushed. And she cared. So it wasn't just fighting. It was really looking for what's underneath there. You know, what else could be there? And being accepting as well. So she was a pretty tremendous human being in the world. I hope she's doing well wherever she is. Now, my wife is no slouch either. So she was more than willing to say, no, you're not going to treat me that way. And there's something else there. So that was a good thing. The other part is I was in graduate school for psychology. Really hard not to examine yourself when you're in that kind of a program, right? You think about all of the things that you're being taught and say, well, how does this apply to me? So all of those things coming together and my decision that I couldn't do therapy with others without really doing this work myself. So there's nothing that I teach in marital therapy that my wife and I don't do. And if I haven't proved it there, even if the research says that it's really good, I'm hesitant to bring it forward. I will go try it out, though, and figure that out. But that's how I did it.
So you've described your situation beautifully. I'm wondering if you have a case history, an example from your own experience as a therapist where a couple came in and were having difficulty expressing their emotions and understanding each other, and then how you help them overcome the toothpaste tube problem or the dishwashing issue or whatever it might have been that seemed like the flashpoint but was really just a symptom of a much more underlying problem.
So a good case, this is Tom and Betty. Tom and Betty came in, and what they presented to me initially was we're having difficulty dealing with our teenage kids. And so...
Understandable.
Yes, yes. And what they wanted help with was parenting. What became evident was that they were parenting from two very different scripts. They had slightly different, not hugely different, but slightly different value bases. And they certainly had two different sets of experience about how to parent kids. One, much more authoritarian. You do what I tell you because I told you, and you do it immediately. And the other, more permissive, more willing to negotiate with the child. Well, this confused the kids. So the kids would play them off one another, right? Because ultimately the kid's just looking to get what they want. You know, that's really, they don't understand long-term consequences of a lot of their choices. Often they don't care. They just haven't been alive long enough. They don't have the experience.
The other kids are doing it. Why can't I go?
Absolutely. Right. What's really all that bad about marijuana? Well, we can't get into that, I'm sure. So they had slightly different things. And because of that, they were disrespectful of one another in their discussions. And that's where the problem was. So I help them recognize that the reason you're not finding a common ground is because you're being disrespectful. You're too busy being right to find a solution. So what if you let go of your position and tried to really understand the position of the other person? What if you looked at what is preventing the solution that I am doing instead of what's preventing the solution by what you're doing? And when they trusted me enough to start to do some of that, and that's scary because, this is the way I was raised. It's the only way I know. Is it really? Haven't you learned things since then? Couldn't you learn things about this topic now? And that's really the freedom that happens for folks when they recognize, yes, that's what my family did, and I can learn something new.
I imagine that there may be times when someone comes in and says, that's what my family did, and I want to be as different as possible from what my family did, so I'm doing something completely different. Mm-hmm. Does it work that way as well?
Absolutely. So the opposite, the idea behind that being that the opposite is the better way. So if I had an authoritarian father, right, then I should be a permissive father.
Right.
It's not quite that. Opposite is not necessarily better. It is just different. What's more important is to step back and say, well, what's the outcome I want to have as a parent? And if I know what that outcome is, what's the delta between where I am right now and where that outcome is? And what do I need to do to get there? Very much like if I wanted to go to San Diego, California, I could step back and say, I'm here in Durham, North Carolina. What's the map between here and there? Where are the places I need to turn? Now, it's a whole lot easier to get from here to San Diego than it is to get from where you are with your kid at 6 years old to graduating college. And there are still some pretty well-marked roads to get there.
You're listening to Dr. Don Azevedo. He's a clinical psychologist and founder of Azevedo Family Psychology in Cary, North Carolina.
Terry, a lot of times people just want to be right. They think...
Oh, tell me about that. That comes from my family of origin. Being right was a big important value.
But they don't really think that much about the outcome. What do I want to accomplish beyond just being right?
And often just being right, it's not an end in itself, although it may come to seem like one.
Well, we do need to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll find out whether keeping your spouse happy has a selfish aspect to it.
How can couples find creative solutions for their arguments?
When people are having trouble, how can they recognize a serious problem that requires action?
And we'll find out how well therapy works for couples that are in trouble.
What can people do to strengthen their relationships, starting right now?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. Thanks for listening to this podcast of The People's Pharmacy. If you like it, why not rate or review it in the iTunes store? We'd appreciate it. Welcome back to The People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth foot cream with shea butter, helping dry, cracked feet feel utterly soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you'd like to purchase a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1060. The number again, 800-732-2334, or you can find it online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today we're talking about how to keep relationships healthy. How can we recognize danger signs, and what should we do when they appear? Our guest is Dr. Don Azevedo. He's a clinical psychologist and founder of Azevedo Family Psychology in Cary, North Carolina.
Dr. Azevedo, we understand that there is research showing that if your spouse is happy, you are going to enjoy better health. Now, obviously, that has implications for how you treat your spouse. It seems to be it's in your best interest, your self-interest, to not do things that make your spouse unhappy. How about that?
You know, there's that overused phrase, if mama's happy, everybody's happy. So help us understand about everybody's healthy.
So it's also, if Papa's happy, everybody's happy.
Right.
So happiness, let's start there.
Okay.
Happiness begins with yourself. You determine your happiness for the vast majority of it. The world can be whatever the world is, but how you choose to respond to it will be what determines your level of happiness. So that's one statement. The next is you can create an environment that promotes the likelihood of happiness. So how do you create that environment? The number one thing, be kind. When you are talking to your spouse, let your words, let your tone, let your body be uplifting to them, even when you're making a complaint. So I can complain to you. I can say, Joe, I really don't like it that when you come in the house, you take off your jacket, you take off your tie, you throw them, all over the place, and I feel required to go pick it up because I don't like the place being messy. I end up feeling resentful. What I'd really like, Joe, is when you come in, I've got a hanger right here for you. Hang up your jacket, hang up the tie, and I'll be more than happy to put that in the closet. That's easy for me. What do you think?
Oh, that sounds very nice. I don't feel like you're judging me, blaming me, criticizing me. You're coming up with a solution.
Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about the behavior and its effect on me before I even come up with or suggest a solution. Right? So it's really not about you. It's about how I'm responding to you. That's an uplifting complaint. Then notice the things that are there between the two of you. Wow, I really like seeing your smiling face. I really appreciate the wonderful dinner. I really like the way that you handled the kids when they were fighting just a moment ago. Be kind, be polite, catch them doing positive things.
We've heard in the past that if you can manage to say 5 positive things to your partner for every 1 negative thing, you'll be able to slip in 1 or 2 negative things in the course of a day without damaging the relationship.
And that's about right. The 5-to-1 rule is not rigorously scientifically studied, but experientially, it works really well. So when the relationship is filled with positive things and we're working together and we're solving problems together and we're focused on what we're building going out into the future, then when a trouble spot hits, it's easier to talk about, hey, this behavior has come up, it's striking me badly, I'd like something different, what do you think? What's your point of view? Because like I did with the clothes thing just a second ago, you might come back to me, Joe, and say, well, the reason I'm doing this is this. Right? I can actually give this one from when I was much younger and our children were very little. So our kids were little. I'm a clinical psychologist. Everybody wants to come after work. So my work day ended at 7 p.m. I could get home roughly by 7:30. Kids needed to be in bed by 8. I had 30 minutes during the week to see them. My focus was on seeing my kids, not being disrespectful to my wife, not doing anything else. But I would come in, that's back when I wore a tie because I thought I had to dress up in order to be professional. Rip off my tie, wrap it around the banister, play with my kids, scoop them up, take them upstairs, read them a bedtime story, they go to sleep. I've forgotten my tie. My wife is walking up going, this is my workspace, and it's now dirty. And she takes off the tie, she brings it upstairs, she hangs it up because she's a very nice person. But she was resenting it the whole time. She was also resenting the fact that all of my attention in that first half hour was with my kids. She felt left out. She'd been with the kids. She needed adult interaction, which we had afterwards, but that wasn't the initial thing. She finally complained to me, saying that I had no respect for her workspace and that she would never come into my space and dump papers all over my office and that kind of thing because she had respect for it. Why don't I have respect for hers? And I looked at her and I said, I haven't even thought about this. The tie is bothersome to me. I don't really like it. I want to rip it off before I get down on the ground and play with my kids because it was all on the carpet, right? They were little at the time. It has nothing to do with you, honey. I only get this little tiny sliver. And then my resentment built up. Why, when you've spent the whole day with the kids, do you resent me for this 30 minutes? And now I'm righteous and indignant. And I had lots of practice of that early in my life. Not helpful to really hearing her point of view. That argument went on for a while, and finally we were able to step back and do this in a more respectful way. So when you come home and put your tie around the thing, I feel resentment and anger because I like a straight house. So I'm required to take it upstairs. What I would prefer is you either put it in this box on the laundry machine or take it off but keep it around your neck so that when you go up with the kids, you're taking it up with you. Very reasonable response. I thought about that for a while and I said, you know what? I have a better idea. I'm going to stop wearing a tie.
Problem solved.
Problem solved.
Well, what you're suggesting, and it's rather brilliant, in my opinion, is that you come to every problem or challenge that you're faced as a couple, first, of course, with an understanding of why and, what the historical perspective might be. Terry appreciates my historical perspectives. But also coming with a solution. Mm-hmm. Now, it may not be the perfect solution, but at least you're saying, well, could we try this strategy? Mm-hmm. And if that strategy won't work, then, well, what would work? Mm-hmm. And ultimately, you may have to try a couple of strategies to find the one that really suits that particular situation. So the way we solve the toothpaste tube problem?
We each have our own toothpaste.
There you go.
And that way, we not only does it not matter who squeezes the toothpaste in the middle and who rolls it up from the end, although toothpaste tube technology has changed, so that's much less relevant now than it once was. But also, we each get to use the toothpaste that we prefer.
There you go.
Yeah, we haven't had an argument about toothpaste in about 30 years.
Right.
But it's that kind of thing. It's really that, and it's respectful. And now it's a joke between the two of you.
Absolutely.
It's a sense of warmth and connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So as you look into your crystal ball, because, clearly divorce is a major issue. I mean, we hear all kinds of statistics. 50% of all marriages end in divorce. A lot of people aren't even getting married because they want to, test the relationship for a year, 2 years, 5 years. So how can people begin to first recognize that this isn't just, the average tension of a relationship, that it now requires some action? And how well does therapy work? Because not everybody can solve these issues on their own.
Wow, that's a big question. So let me break it down into some parts. One of the teachers I had in my life was Dr. Lori Gordon, and she talked about love is an emotion. Marriage is a contract. A relationship is work. So if you want a good contract that lasts for a lifetime in marriage, you have to work at your relationship every single day. Every day you need to put coins in the bank through kindness, politeness, showing your partner, I choose you. Right? I chose you when I married you, but I choose you every single day thereafter, and I will demonstrate that to you. Put that time and energy and effort into the relationship. And this is getting your priorities straight, right? First, you have to take care of you because you show up in every story in your life. Then you need to take care of this unique relationship, this choice that you've made to be in this marriage. And that means bringing up the trouble spots when they happen, and more often noticing when it works and how much you appreciate how well it works. Right? Then take care of your kids, then take care of your extended family, then take care of your work. Most Americans put work at the top or children at the top, and both of those things will suffer. So that's one of the things. Get your priorities right. Remember that love is an emotion, and like all emotions, comes and goes. A marriage is a contract. A relationship is work.
How do you begin to recognize that there are some issues that need to be addressed? Because I think a lot of people, just put their relationship in neutral or on hold, and they coast, and they don't really test the water very much. And they may be doing all the right things. They may be, sending the Valentine card, the anniversary, blah, 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 doing everything that's quote unquote expected, but not paying very close attention to the day-to-day stuff.
Okay. So then the things to look at is stop and question yourself. Do I like going home to this person? Do I like spending time with this person? Does the thought of this person still bring a smile to my lips? Or when I think of this person, I'm angry. My face gets sour. I dread going home, or I dread hearing the other person come home. You need to start looking at what is my reaction to my spouse. And if it's not this sense of, actually, that's where I want to be. If something good happens, this is the first person I want to tell. If something bad happens, this is the first person I want to tell. If you can't say yes to those questions, then you know you're in trouble. Now, do you need a therapist? Different question.
Is it too late when you start to notice those things? I mean, can you fix a relationship along the lines of the one you just described?
Well, what I notice here is that in describing your practice, you say you offer something called discernment counseling. That's a bit of what we're talking about, isn't it?
It is. So discernment counseling is a specific process for when you have brought up the question of divorce might be the solution, but I'm not sure. I'm not ready to go to a lawyer because I don't know that that's the path I want, but I'm not happy in my marriage. So you come to this to discern, and the only question on the table is, what is the future of our relationship? That's it. I'm not going to do therapy with you. I'm not going to entertain anything else. We're not going to go into the histories. We're going to talk about what is the future of your relationship. And then we get people to give us, what is the divorce narrative? What's the story you're telling that says that divorce needs to be the answer? And what's the repair narrative? What am I doing to try and fix this? Relationships get into trouble all the time, just like people get sick all of the time. Should we just let everybody die when they get a cold? No. We treat them. We take care of them. We know a whole bunch of things to do, and it might take a little while for them to get better, but we know what to do to help them break a fever and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Same thing with marriage. Just because you're in trouble doesn't mean that divorce is the answer. It will mean, though, that you have to come and work. It's much like having a dislocated joint, right? They can relocate the joint, but then you have to do the physical therapy to strengthen it and make sure that it stays in place. Same thing with marital therapy. You're out of joint. I'm going to help you get back in pattern with one another, and then I'm going to expect you to practice the ways that strengthen and reinforce, making sure that joint doesn't get injured again.
For our listeners who would like to strengthen their relationships and develop some of the skills that you have been talking about, what are some practical things that they could start doing right now?
Practical things that are relatively low-hanging fruit. Great. When you come home tonight, go find your spouse, give them a hug, say hello, say, I'm glad to be home. Right? Number one, demonstrate I really care about you. Don't go to the television, don't go to the kids, don't go to the dog, don't go to the bathroom, because it's only going to take you 5 seconds to do that. Go and greet them and remind them that they are important to you. You'll be surprised at the response that you get if this is not something you typically do. If you're making a meal together, or you come in and make the meal, comment on, I'm so glad that all the ingredients were here. If your partner bought it, thank you for doing that. Or if they prepared it, thank you for having food on the table. This is really, it's important to me when I come home, that whatever it might be. If they're handling a difficult child situation and they resolve it well, say, wow, thanks for doing that. Thanks for really being there for our kids. Be appreciative, be grateful, and share that information. We are the stingiest society with sharing our gratitude with others. This is in the workplace. This is at home. This is with our children. We will point out what's missing, but we hesitate to point out what's present.
It sounds like in order to do this, you also have to pay attention.
Yes. If you don't show up to your life, it will go by in an instant, and you will have done nothing.
Dr. Don Azevedo, thanks so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Dr. Don Azevedo. He's a clinical psychologist and founder of Azevedo Family Psychology in Cary, North Carolina.
And the name is spelled Acevedo.
That's all the time we have. Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Al Wodarski is the engineer. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Red X Industries, makers of Utterly Smooth Extra Care 20 cream with 20% urea for extra skin protection. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
To order a CD of today's show or any People's Pharmacy broadcast, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is 1060. That number again, 800-732-2334, online at peoplespharmacy.com.
When you visit that site, you can check out information on prescription drugs, herbal medicines, and home remedies. You can share your thoughts on today's show. We'd love to have your feedback, and we hope you'll share your story.
Well, I really like the idea of be kind because, that serves you well, whether it's in a home relationship, whether it's at work, whether it's on a trip, no matter where you go. Just be kind.
Well, that's a really good advice. And there are a few other things that Dr. Azevedo said, like pay attention and show your appreciation and gratitude and show that other person that you really do care about them first and foremost.
When you visit our website, you can also sign up for a free online newsletter or the free podcast of the show. You can listen at your own convenience or share it with a friend. It's all there at peoplespharmacy.com. In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thank you for listening. Please join us again next week.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to The People's Pharmacy.
Are you ready to unlock your creativity and transform your passion for beauty into a career? Southeastern College is here to help you take your first steps towards training for a career in cosmetology. Unlock your potential and start your path towards a career making people feel confident. It's time to invest in yourself. Visit sec.edu for more information on our programs and take the first step toward training for a brand new career in cosmetology. Your before and after story starts now at Southeastern College.